Hello, and welcome to another edition of Economic Outlook. I'm your host, Phil DAmico. The medical device industry is approximately a $150 billion industry. Effective January 1st, the United States government implemented a medical device excise tax of 2.3% on the gross sales of every medical device sold in the United States. This medical device tax could have huge ramifications on the medical device industry and specifically in our region right here in Warsaw, Kosciusko County. We examine this very important issue affecting our region on the next Economic Outlook. I'm Phil DAmico. Whether we're exploring Michiana's business environment, our community at large, or covering the region's complex economy, Economic Outlook is where we explore the economy, education, manufacturing, and new business models. My job is to go beyond the numbers and corporate analysis as we invite some of the best experts to answer the hard questions that face our economy. This is Economic Outlook. There are nearly 6,000 people working directly and approximately 6,000 people working indirectly in the medical device industry in the Warsaw, Indiana, and Kosciusko County areas. Nearly 60% of the medical device industry and production occurs in that same area. Orthopedic device sales coming out of the Warsaw area account for about $33 billion annually. Effective January 1 of this year, the federal government, as part of the Affordable Care Act, implemented a 2.3% excise tax on gross sales of all medical devices sold right here in the United States. This will have a direct and indirect effect on the region. To discuss this medical device tax in greater detail, we invite to this week's show Mark Dobson, President and CEO of the Warsaw Kosciusko County Chamber of Commerce, and Nick Deeter, Founder, Chairman of the Board, and Managing Director, Orthopediatrics, a worldwide leader in pediatric orthopedics. Welcome, gentlemen. I clearly didn't get the memo on the ties today, so I love both of your ties. Great concept.
Thanks,
Mark, this is such an interesting topic, and in doing research on this, boy, this really does, we talked in the opening, have huge ramifications on your area. Maybe give us an overview a little bit about this medical device tax.
Well, you're right, it was implemented, it's a top-level tax, it's an excise tax. So whether a company like Orthopediatrics makes a profit or not, they're going to pay 2.3% on a medical device. And I think we all think of medical devices as a hips and shoulders and knees, that sort of a thing. But the medical device tax is broad in the industry. It's heart pacemakers, it's hospital beds, it's tongue depressors, the stands for IVs. These are all medical devices by the definition of the law. And so it's a hugely impactful tax on these businesses. And again, it's before they even make a profit.
Right, and it was implemented, we talked, Nick, in January of this year. Where does it stand right now? It's officially in the works.
It's officially in effect.
But there is a repeal that they're looking at, correct?
There is. Recently there was an amendment that was part of the overall budget that had bipartisan support in the Senate, and it was able to have enough of a vote to repeal it, but it's part of the bigger budget that probably won't go through. But once that gets peeled off, if it can and does as a separate amendment or a separate bill, then there's a good possibility it could be repealed.
Yeah, I know both you and the Chamber and the county have done yeoman's efforts in trying to get this repealed for your community. Where does it stand from your standpoint? I mean, to Nick's comments, do we have a shot at getting this thing repealed?
Well, I think the industry feels a little more positive than do we. I think that there will be an effort in the Senate to repeal it and to carry, even potentially peel off that piece of legislation. But it needs to go through on a veto-proof majority, and I think the President has already indicated he would veto the effort, the repeal of the medical device tax, and then we have to be able to overturn that veto, and I'm not confident that that can happen.
Yeah, what's interesting, Nick, I want to get your thoughts on this. This was right out of the Washington Post. It gave a list of major revenue sources of the Affordable Care Act over the coming decade, and in there, $165 billion in taxes and fees on certain health industry and manufacturers of the medical device industry. Big number to businesses and employers like yourself.
It's a huge number. It's really it's a job killer is what it is. Those funds have to somewhere come out of your budget, your current budget that's usually a slight increase over last year's budget. So when you take a big chunk of your dollars out, it has to come from somewhere, and a lot of that's coming from the R&D area. It's hurting innovation. It's hurting new employees that could come into the market.
Yeah, and we talked, Mark, in the opening, and a great segue on the jobs. This is interesting. This is right out of the New York Times. Money to pay the tax comes from somewhere. Reduced jobs, research cuts, and more likely both. Thousands have already been laid off, and an analysis shows that the tax threatens as much as 40,000 American jobs. We talked about how big of an industry this is in your community, so jobs is a big, big issue.
It's a really big issue. There's an interesting statistic out there. There's a anticipated increase in demand just for knees, as we're with our aging population, of 674% over the next 20 years. So with that level of demand increase, you would think the orthopedic capital of the world would be seeing employment levels that would be extraordinary. The 12 to 13,000 jobs we have currently ought to be expanding at a rapid rate. Well, there have not been any significant increases in employment in orthopedics in Kosciusko County. There have been 3 very quiet layoffs by the big 3 that have cost us probably 1,000 jobs. And while there are expansions in the industry, these companies will tell you they're happening, but they're happening overseas. They're not happening in Minnesota or Tennessee, 2 other centers of excellence. Right. They're happening overseas because there is a better cost structure overseas.
Yeah.
So it is impactful.
No question. I'll take 2 knees today. By the way, my knees are, I'll take 2 of those today. What's interesting, Nick, to Mark's point, and in the same Washington Post article, 71% of industries that are producing medical devices have all said that they would be less likely to hire individuals as a result of this high tax. Are you hearing, seeing that, being a business owner in that area, are you hearing and seeing some of that?
I'm hearing it, and I'm feeling it right in our own company. Through our strategic planning process, with the demand we have for devices for children, we need to add another 20% to our current employment base in town. So we need to add another 20% at Orthopediatrics in employees. We're going to add a percentage we won't even measure. We're going to add 2 or 3 people, but we have added a new person that will be living in Europe. We added a new person in Latin America. We have another person that won't be not only in Indiana, they won't be in the country. So it's a real issue. We've also moved some of our manufacturing out of the area so we could try and save some costs, and that's moved to China already.
Yeah, and that's the interesting point, Mark. Nick brought up China. I think that's a big X factor here. Is we talked about the U.S. sales, the tax on the U.S. sales. The overseas market is going to affect this, and to Nick's point, he's hiring people overseas right now. It's got to be a huge thing that you're looking at from the chamber perspective.
Well, yeah, it's a community-wide, and it's Kosciusko County, absolutely impactful. There's companies like Orthopediatrics throughout Kosciusko County, but it also impacts into this region. You're aware of a machine company here in Mishawaka that produces parts that are affected by the excise tax. And produce parts for several of the companies in Kosciusko County. The foreign employment, I think historically we always felt like China wasn't a competitor because China couldn't produce at the quality level that the U.S. could produce. Now the guys in the industry tell us they're that close. They are indeed American expertise until they have gotten so close it's almost a fungible product. And so when we lose our competitive advantage in the ability to produce superior product, you understand the choices that Nick has to make.
Yeah, and what's interesting in talking to this manufacturer in Mishawaka, we were talking about the quality. He said, look, a lot of the people affecting quality now are working in China and working overseas, so they know the value of. Right. Is that what you're seeing as well? That some of the talent is heading over there?
We are, and you'll still see some of the higher technology products being made in this area, but some of what have become commodity products, screws, plates, pins, wires, that's easy to make. And the quality, it's hard to not make it right with the quality structure that's already set up in China.
Yeah, and what's interesting, Nick, in preparing for this show and talking to you, you brought up a point that still sticks in my mind today. As you said, the U.S. used to have dominance in this industry. We were the preeminent person to make medical devices. this may affect that preeminence and that dominance. Maybe you can comment on that.
I feel that's true. It really comes from more of the research and development side. We've always been a leader in the medical device technology area, pharmaceuticals, other areas. But medical devices especially, if you take away money off the top line, that's what we had to do. We had to cut our R&D budget, and we just won't be developing products for children that they need today. And those products, by the time you get them through the FDA and out, it's not just a delay till next year. That's all of a sudden a 5-year delay. And then you look at some of the problems with the FDA and how slow they are in approving product. It's so much faster to get products onto the market in Europe. So you start looking at your whole business from a global perspective of, well, if you're going to manufacture somewhere else and you're going to start selling somewhere else, well, why wouldn't you move some of your business somewhere else other than the U.S.? And I think that R&D side is the biggest killer from innovation standpoint that's going to put the U.S. in a real bind.
Well, it really is, and Warsaw has been noted as really the leader driver of all of this. Not too dissimilar from Elkhart being the leader driver of the RV industry,
Sure.
but that specialty and that niche that Nick's talking about, that's really important to hang on to, especially since you're known as kind of the capital of orthopedic parts and devices.
Yeah, the industry actually started in Warsaw, Indiana.
Right.
Rever Depew in 1895 created the first device. And you quoted the statistics, 50% of U.S. production and 30% of worldwide production happens in Kosciusko County. But more important is what Nick was talking about, the R&D. We are the center of excellence for orthopedics. All of the innovation comes out of Kosciusko County. There are a couple of other very significant companies, but they also are represented in Kosciusko. So it's a hard issue to talk about, but all you have to do is look just north of Detroit and look what happened when the U.S. gave up our preeminent position in the automotive industry to see how this could affect, the effect on the orthopedic industry.
Yeah, what's interesting in this same article in the Washington Post, Nick, they talked about companies cutting marketing and or innovation budgets, entrepreneurial budgets by nearly 40% because of the result of the increased tax. Have you seen that? Is that a real number? Is that a real deal?
We have, and matter of fact, what you're seeing are companies, especially smaller companies that do have a technology. They've raised capital. They're trying to do something with it. They can't raise additional capital to move that forward. So they're coming to companies, even smaller companies like ours, to see if we can help them commercialize it, get it out to the marketplace, because that money is just evaporated on that side. On the bigger company side, there are whole projects that have been cut out, people laid off in those areas. And we've looked, we have about 50 projects in our pipeline. Usually the companies and Wall Streets look at companies and say, well, you don't have enough in your pipeline. We have way too much in our pipeline. We can't get to it now because we get to send our check to the federal government for no real impact on what it was meant to impact.
So we're call to action from the community standpoint. I know you're actively involved in looking at this nationally. What can viewers, individuals, what can we do to maybe look at this more closely and maybe take a part where we assist the area and the region?
Well, for the most part, the Indiana delegation, congressional and Senate delegation, have supported repeal, but they need to hear from the public a strength of voice. They need, when the president vetoes this, they need to understand that this is an important issue and they need to stay strong. Congressman Donnelly and Senator Donnelly, Senator Coates, need to have hear from that. It also would be helpful from the corporate America to reach into the states that also have orthopedic centers of excellence. Representative Paulson and Senator Klobuchar from Minnesota have been staunch voices of support. And so if you have a tie in Minnesota or a tie in California or Tennessee, to make sure that delegation says, this tax is not doing what it's intended to do, and it's a job killer, not a fundraiser. And it even impacts the cost of health. I mean, ultimately, that device is going to cost more. And so it doesn't lower the cost of health care for the guy who gets the knee, it's going to raise his cost.
Yeah, and what's interesting, you guys talked a little bit about it, but the demand, we got a lot of baby boomers out there like myself that are out of shape and need a lot of parts, need new parts. That's a huge demographic though, and that is going to help, I think, increase the market share. But but to your point, how do we get there as it relates to building up inventories and things like that? It's a big number.
It's 674% in knees. I've heard 174% in shoulders. We are an aging population.
Right.
We're living longer, and we want to have a high quality of life as we live longer. And so the medical device contributes to that. It's a lifestyle enhancement. My father's 80 years old. He has a device due to a break in his hip. Years ago, years ago, he probably would have spent the rest of his life with a severe limp or maybe in a wheelchair. Well, device today, he has a lifestyle choice. He's golfing again. This is going to raise that cost, and it won't be as affordable as it is today.
Yeah. Where does it stand? Mark talked a little bit from the legislative side. Are there grassroots efforts going on, Nick, from manufacturers like yourself? Are there organizations involved from the manufacturing side getting involved in this? Yeah,
there are probably the national group, AdvaMed, which is the group that most manufacturers belong to. They're pushing it from that side. It's really gotten a lot of interest because it doesn't make a lot of sense to pull those kind of dollars out. And people, I think, are understanding it. It's a number they can wrap their arms around at 2.3%. And it's such a small piece of what goes toward Obamacare that it really doesn't make a difference. It hurts jobs, but it provides really no benefit. It's maybe $2 billion a year. That whole program is in the $800 billion, and they don't even know. I mean, HSS just came out today, Health and Human Services, said it's going to cost us twice as much now to administer the program than we thought it was. They're hiring 140,000 people to try and explain how to belong to or be in Obamacare. I mean, that's a third of our Marine Corps. I mean, it just doesn't make sense why you'd want a bunch of people trying to explain something nobody wants in the first place.
Yeah, we're about 200 to 300 million already that's been collected from what I understand thus far this year.
Since January 1st.
Since January 1st. It's 2.3% now from what I understand. They want to increase that as well. Is it next year or the year after? It's coming up.
Well, you rarely hear the government say, boy, we have this opportunity to lower your taxes, so we're happy to do so. So, yeah, I think as they find that this unfunded mandate of the Affordable Care Act becomes far more expensive than anticipated, they're going to keep looking at sources. And if they already have the foot under the door for the device tax, why not go 2.7 or 3.5?
Well, I'm curious, gentlemen, does this increase insurance costs, or is there an effect, a multiplier effect all the way down the line, Nick, for business owners, for employees, for the general public? Do we see that?
Well, one of the things we're seeing right now, medical device companies like ours, we're not doing this, but others are, they're just tacking it right onto the invoice to the hospital. And there's been a lot of pushback from the hospital, as you may expect, that they're saying, well, now why do we have to pay that? And they still are, the majority of the patients that Mark talked about are Medicare patients. So that's bills just getting passed right straight through to Medicare. And, it's nobody's winning in this situation.
Yeah, and what's interesting, Mark, we opened by talking about jobs, but I think, one of the things, these are high-paying jobs. I mean, these jobs have a direct impact on the health and wealth and prosperity of a community. They're typically higher paying jobs. They're not obviously $6, $7, $8 an hour jobs. I mean, these things are very high end. That's